Welcome back to Making Money Matter, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Kerry Stevenson, and a lot of you out there have said to me, what about finding a really interesting silver company? So I've delivered for you, ladies and gentlemen, because I reached out to Todd Williams. He's the managing director of Unico Silver. The ASX code is USL, and they are doing really interesting things in Argentina. We're going to talk about that. I think that you all know me as that gold lady, but I am paying a little bit of attention, a little bit more attention, if you like, to silver because the market is starting to wake up. So I'm delighted. There's lots of news. I've known Todd for a few years now, but this is the first time on Making Money Matter. So, Todd, great to see you again. Thanks for joining me today.
Excellent. No, thanks for having me, Kerry.
As it's the first time, can you give us really, I guess, a simple explanation of who are Unico Silver, where you are, Argentina, and what you're doing, why you think right now is a very interesting time for Unico?
Yeah, excellent. Look, so Unico Silver is I guess we're an explorer transitioning to developer. Clearly, we're on the ASX. We're really born from a period of consolidation. We've done 5 deals in the last 18 months, 2 years, which has really brought together a silver district in the Santa Cruz province of Argentina that was previously fragmented. So it was owned by a number of majors, a number of juniors. And so we started consolidating when the silver price was at $18 per ounce. We concluded this consolidation strategy in August last year with probably one of the main transactions, which was the acquisition of the Joaquin and the Cerro Puntudo properties. And that was a really interesting opportunity because what it done is through one deal with Pan American Silver actually brought together a large silver district that was previously owned by two majors. So Pan American Silver owned the northern half of the district, Yamana owned the southern half of the district. We were in negotiations with Pan America to acquire Joaquin. And while those negotiations were underway, they actually merged with Yamana and brought the two assets together. And so, we were able to bring those two assets together in essentially two separate transactions. But it just meant for the first time ever in the project's history, we've got the Joaquin project controlled by one single junior. But importantly, we no longer have a tenement boundary in the middle of the mineral resource, which is one of the interesting nuances of the project.
Those five projects over a period of time, how difficult, because you said just then that this was the first time in a lot ever that this has come together. I want to understand uh, how you got to where you've got to today in bringing all this. Was it difficult? Was it tough?
Look, I guess it starts with a vision, right? And so,
Yeah.
in 2022, when the market had turned, we thought, well, look, sometimes when the market's really tough, you have to capitulate to your core competency, what you're good at, and what your strategic advantage is. And, at that point, we were putting out silver drill hits, which were unparalleled on the ASX, tens of meters at plus kilo type silver intercepts,
Yeah,
which
crazy.
we hadn't really seen on the ASX. We had Eric Sprott as a major shareholder, and so you really capitulate to what you know and what you're good at. And we thought, well, hang on, there's a unique opportunity here to bring to the market, bring to the ASX a leading silver company, but the only thing standing in our way is four transactions with three separate companies. So
Oh,
we
just
sort
a,
of
just a tidy little detail.
yeah, that's exactly right. And so we sort of embarked on this, the 2 year journey of getting those deals done. Obviously, we got a deal done with Austral Gold to acquire Pinguino in November 2022, and I think the last time you and I spoke, we were preparing a maiden JORC compliant resource for that project.
Yeah.
We later acquired the property next door to Pinguino, which was Cerro Blanca, which was actually a complex joint venture between Austral Gold and Capella, which is one of the spin outs of Mariana Resources, which explored the property in the early 2000s, late 2010s. And prior to that was actually held by IM Gold. So there you go. There's sort of a very
Wow.
complicated ownership history there. And so when we did that deal and brought Serra Blanca and Pinguino together, what we actually did was for the first time unified one of the largest epithermal vein fields in Santa Cruz by size and scale.
Mhm.
So the scale of the Pinguino Serra Blanca vein field is huge. It has measured dimensions of around 15 kilometers by 15 kilometers, and there's sort of, 150 lineal kilometers of outcropping epithermal veins. And to date, we've really only explored 20% of those veins. So the potential for growth at Pinguino or Cerro Leon, which is the consolidated block, the opportunity for growth there, we think is huge.
How do you manage such a large area, and how do you decide where to go? Because you said we've only explored quite a small area. I wanted to understand, I guess, the strategy behind doing, as you said, 5 deals over the past 18 months. Why, what the strategy is and how you take that forward. I'm looking for shareholder value going forward.
Well, look, put simply, firstly, both of them had excellent geology. So I sort of touched on the fact that we felt that these were tip of the iceberg type transactions, where what you see is only a small portion of what you get in terms of exploration growth and resource potential. We certainly saw that with Sierra Leone. We certainly felt that with Joaquin. I think the opportunity to grow the resource at Joaquin was far more visceral in that you could literally feel and touch the extensions of that mineral resource, which continued into the old Yamana ground. We could see the potential and the scope to grow that resource. So that's like clearly that's an important first step. But then we also thought that the assets made complete sense being together as a consolidated portfolio because both were silver dominant, which is unique because in Santa Cruz we are surrounded by world-class gold mines, and
Mm.
those gold mines produce silver as a byproduct, but it certainly represents a small part of their revenue mix, probably 20% on average. So, to have this sort of unique blend where you've got two projects with really clear exploration potential, both being silver dominant, both accessible by existing roads and
Oh, good.
public highways.
Okay.
Sort of basically meant that, we really thought this was a camp scale opportunity to build, hopefully not one mine, but multiple. And if we fail in doing so, we think that, at least the two are a 1 + 1 = 3, where there are clear operational synergies that we can leverage.
Now that you've done these deals and you've consolidated this area, what's your biggest challenge at the moment, Todd?
The biggest challenge, look, when we announced the transaction in August, we had $3 million cash and we had a 16-cent share price,
Wow.
and so our cash
Just last August of last year.
just August of last year.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So our cost of capital was huge. We had 3 million in the bank and we needed 5 to close the transaction. I'm speaking Australian dollars. And so, I guess what kept me up at night was obviously bringing this opportunity into a buoyant market where we could lower our cost of capital and actually raise enough meaningful funds to move the project forward. And so, we're able to thread that needle. We were marketing the deal quite heavily in October last year. We managed to raise $30 million in
Oh,
two
wow.
tranches. We managed to raise $22.5 million at a price just around where we are today at 27 cents. So, put simply, we sort of threaded the needle, if you will. We're able to recapitalize the business and, breathe new oxygen into this portfolio, which I think we've successfully done.
Right.
We've now embarked, well, we've completed 30,000 meters of drilling, which has, been a huge milestone for us. It's one of the most aggressive drill campaigns completed by a junior company in Santa Cruz for probably 10 years. I really struggle to think of who would have been the last company, probably Extore or
Wow.
Andine, both, obviously wild success stories. We've got this real inside track into being one of the preeminent juniors in Santa Cruz. We're certainly sort of posturing ourselves to be that. I think we've done a really good job de-risking the historical resources in the sense that, the project did include a combination of historical JORC resources, foreign estimates, under the Canadian system, and then also areas that have been drilled out that actually hadn't been converted into formal resources. So we sort of had three different types of advanced prospects that we had to sort of unify, and I think we've sort of successfully done that. And in the background, sort of understanding how these projects could fit together and really the corporate strategy document that we platformed last week essentially reflects that line of thinking. It's essentially a roadmap that we see, an inside track, if we will, as we transition from explorer to developer and really outlines what our priorities will be for the next 12 months.
Talk to us about transitioning from explorer to developer. So, what does that look like uh, going forward? I'm speaking to you. Cannot believe it. Coming up towards the end of June 2025. What does that transition period look like? And have you got enough funds at the moment to do what you need to do? Two questions.
Yeah, well, just first question. I guess as of the end of March, we had just under $20 million cash. So that sort of answers question number two. Question number
Yep.
one, I think, the to better understand the thinking behind the corporate strategy, I think it's also really helpful to zoom out and have a look at the general landscape, what's happening in the silver space. Obviously, I've bounced at the water cooler with a lot of the corporate development teams, a lot of the big silver producers, especially over the last 1 year. And what we're seeing is that there's a really huge premium paid for companies that can actually transition from explorer to developer and even producer. And there's not a lot of interest to come down the Lawson curve and actually look at companies at the stage that we're at. So I think there's an awareness within our industry that if you want to be trading at, full value, you actually just have to step up to the plate and move the project forward. So that's one point. The second point is, we're actually seeing some really good market valuations for what silver mines are worth. In the past 6 months, we've had three single asset
Mm.
silver miners acquired by silver majors. First, we had Silvercrest, which was acquired by Coeur d'Alene. We then saw Gatos Silver acquired by First Majestic. And more recently, we've seen Mag Silver acquired by Pan American Silver. And so, the cupboard is completely bare. There's
And just
absolutely.
it would be wrong if we didn't mention the numbers around that as well. They're in the billions,
Oh,
aren't they?
yeah, I was getting to that. And so
Yeah, sorry.
essentially what we're seeing is a parameter space of deals of, $1 billion to 2 billion in the case of Mag Silver. That's US, not Aussie. For silver production, that's ranging from, 5 million ounces of primary silver to 7 million ounces of primary silver per annum. And
Wow.
so what that shows, it gives you a sense of what is the value of silver production at the current silver prices. And a lot of the analysts actually say that those deals were done at two times NAV or two times the book value of those assets, which shows that a lot of these majors are sort of either forward thinking in terms of where they see silver price going, or they're willing to apply a very low discount to those cash flows. So either way, it's positive for us.
Mhm.
And, what it shows is that, if you can bring to the market a development story that can produce circa 7 million ounces of silver a year, you're a real company.
Yeah.
And you're in that sort of top decile of silver developers globally. Now, one of the really interesting nuances around our project is, once again, we've got uh, historical JORC compliant resources. We've got resources that we've announced. We've also got foreign estimates, and we've got advanced prospects that have had a lot of drilling that just don't even have a resource statement or a resource calculation. So, we've tried to unify all of that through this corporate strategy document. We've put out a plus 150 exploration target, which is basically an aspirational target to build 150 million ounces of pit
Wow.
constrained and free milling oxide silver mineralisation. And then a separate dual strategy to grow to beyond 300, which really a lot of that will come from growth in the deeper sulfide mineralisation, which, most analysts or technical people will understand, sits in a different flow sheet, so needs to be adapted. So it's sort of you park that up to one side and you can worry about that at a later date. But the immediate development priorities, it's sort of to grow out this plus 150 pit constrained oxide resource. And why that's important is because the project is polymetallic.
Yeah.
And what that means is that, you have a combination of silver, gold, lead, and zinc throughout the resource. And the relative ratios of those metals change at different depths. And
Right.
so, what's really interesting about our project and what's really exciting about our project is that the highest silver ratios occur from surface to about 150 meters below the surface, which essentially means that all the mineralization that you mine first in pits has anywhere from 70 to 80% silver with a small gold credit. So that's really important. So that means if you're talking, let's call it 100 million ounce reserve base, silver equivalent reserve base, what you're really saying is you've got 70 to 80 million ounces of silver with a small component of gold.
Right.
And so really that points to your potential production profile, net of recoveries, et cetera, et cetera. And it starts showing to the market, well, hang on, like if we can actually execute that, given what we know about the project, this will be a very high value silver development option.
In terms of a mineral uh, resource estimate and the next steps, if you like, what is that looking like in time wise?
Yep. So what is that looking like? So maybe if I just sort of take a step back and just go through the news that we've put out in the last couple of weeks. So essentially what we've done is we've put the flag at the mountain, right? And we've said, all right, we are willing to die on this mountain. We believe
I
that our
love it.
project hangs together. We are happy to say this is what we're doing, this is where we're going. So that's the first point. The second point is now, okay, how does all the results announced subsequent to that fall within that broader strategy? And so what's really interesting is, we put out the corporate strategy update on Friday. The following Monday, we put out some excellent infill drill results from Sierra Leone, one of the highest silver drill hits to date for the entire project. That was 36 meters at 436 grams silver, not silver equivalent, starting from surface. So, and that is within a existing mineral resource that we are moving to a higher confidence indicated status, and which will form a large part of this plus 150 development strategy. So that's very comforting to know that, we've got very high grade mineralization within a proven resource with proven metallurgical recoveries that has very low strip and obviously very high tenor silver. So that's fantastic. That is one component of our plus 150 development strategy. The next component, we're very clear at La Negra, which is one of the larger resources at Joaquin. The goal was to grow the La Negra resource into the neighboring ex-Yamana property, which was the Cerro Puntudo property, which had been drilled with sparse 150-meter spaced drill holes, but was never infilled and never converted into a resource.
Okay.
And so earlier last month, we put out initial drill holes from what we call the La Negra extension. Some of those drill holes were excellent. Multiple drill holes hit, 10, 20, 30-meter intercepts at grades higher than the current resource for La Negra, which is excellent. And not only grades higher, but also, expanding the footprint by 100%. So we've actually grown the footprint of that resource, from circa 800 meters to just under 2 kilometers. So excellent, excellent outcome. Once again, big tick to that plus 150 development strategy. Now, the third piece to that, which was announced today, was infill drill holes from the actual La Negra Central. So this is the main La Negra resource. Once again, this was drilled out by Coeur d'Alene Mines in 2012.
Okay.
They announced a foreign estimate based on a 50-meter grid spacing. Their aspirations for the project were to basically just grab the whole lot at a low cutoff and put it through a large plant. And so what we've done is we've come back and we're infilling that resource on a more logical sort of 25 to 15-meter grid spacing over some of the areas with the best grades, to make sure that we can reconcile those historical grades and better define and domain the geometry of the high grades. And what we're really pleased to see from that is not only verifying some of the historical drill hits, confirming the continuity of known mineralisation, but we've also identified areas with huge upside to not only better improve the grade, but also increase the volume of the resource, with once again another standout drill hole for La Negra, one of the highest grade silver drill hits to date for the prospect, 28 meters at just over 500 grams silver, starting at 30 meters depth. So that was in between two historical drill holes and actually completely changes the interpretation of the mineralization and shows that the mineralization is actually flat and horizontal instead of
Nice.
being narrow and vertical, which obviously provides a lot of upside in terms of how it's mined,
Cost.
the continuity, the mineability, etc., etc. So anyway, so we're sort of on this journey now of moving the project through to this plus 150 development resource. A lot of the technical work underpinning that, the development of that resource has already been done. It's worth pointing out that at Joaquin, there's over 100 drill holes that have been tested for metallurgy, confirming robust recoveries in both silver and gold. There's over 50 drill holes in the oxide at Cerro Leon, once again confirming robust recoveries for silver and gold. So we're getting a sense already what a conceptual flow sheet could look like. We're getting a sense for what pit optimization shapes could look like in terms of strip, pit wall angles, etc., etc. There's been a huge amount of hydrology work done by Pan American Silver. They've tested over 100 drill holes to understand the water table and the effects of that water table on any potential open pit operation. And importantly, we're in a granted mining lease. So we're in
Oh,
a mining lease that up until 2.5 years ago actually had active mining in the Lama Rocha underground. So anyway, so we're really excited. We can sort of really see how this is all going to come together. And we've set ourselves some very ambitious targets. And, we look forward to how we sort of work through those targets over the next 12 months.
we don't have a lot of time left. There's two things I want to ask you. First of all, Argentina as a jurisdiction. Um, Are they pro mining? Is it because one of the things you said just before is that you're close to roads and infrastructure, which is great. But what's it like actually working there? Because they've had a regime change recently. Are they pro mining? Are they supportive of what you're doing? And interestingly, you just said then we have a mining lease. So that sounds like permitting is not going to be an issue. But talk to us about that as a jurisdiction.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll look at a very local level. There are no First Nations, Indigenous communities that you need to consult prior to permitting and constructing a mine. So that's one layer of permitting which we don't need to work through in Santa Cruz. I would say, a lot of the environmental baseline permitting is very boilerplate. It's the sort of standard process of as long as you can demonstrate certain environmental protocols within your proposed mining plan, it's a 12-month process for that to be approved. So that's great. Look, at a federal level, we're seeing huge support. The Milei administration has introduced the REGI, which is this incentive regime for large investments that was legislated last year. And essentially, what that contemplates is a fiscal regime more similar to what the regime is in Chile and Peru, with lower corporate tax, reduced export tax duties, obviously abilities to amortize your capex and your infrastructure. And really what that means is basically higher post-tax cash flows, higher internal rates of returns, and clearly a higher NPV for the project, which obviously it's fantastic for us given where we're at, moving from explorer to developer. So yeah, no, look, it's a really exciting time to be operating in Argentina. I'd say it's the first time that we've seen perfect alignment from top down and bottom up.
Yeah, yeah.
We're also seeing that pay dividends, which is, really pleasing for the people of Argentina because we're seeing, BHP invest heavily in copper with multiple investments in Argentina, very large investments. The acquisition of Filo was a great example. And also Rio Tinto, Rio Tinto has acquired the Salar Rincon project and then subsequently acquired Arcadium Lithium. So, there's some big bets being placed by some of the biggest miners in the world on Argentina. And look, we're just really excited to be involved.
Just quickly talk to me or us about news for the second part of the year. What are you going to be doing?
Yep. So look, we've got another 30 drill holes pending from the infill and extensional drilling at La Negra. I think once that's complete, we'll be working through an updated resource on Cerro Leon, and then very promptly we'll be transitioning into an updated resource on Joaquin, so we can actually start bringing some of those numbers together and showing to the market, the sort of conversion of that plus 150 exploration target into real numbers, which will be really pleasing. Importantly, we've still got a huge amount of exploration to do. Really at Joaquin, we've only been afforded sort of 3 months of exploration. We took the keys to the project in October. We finally got our drill permits in late March. So really, we've only had April, May, and June to explore at Joaquin, and clearly our focus there has been on the high confidence, low risk extensional drilling and infill drilling. So, from September onwards, once we get back out into the field, you're going to see us really ratchet up the regional exploration at Joaquin. We've only explored one prospect to date, which is Brunilda. We hit wide zones of silver mineralisation in all 4 holes that we drilled. So we're really excited about how we can convert our exploration targets into real discoveries at other prospects. And then obviously, once we have the resource in the state that we want it, we want to move straight into a scoping study to start showing some numbers around how it can all fit together and mine plan and economics, etc., and then move quickly into a PFS. And really, a lot of that has to be accelerated because of the REGI. The REGI, this incentive regime for large investments. To qualify for that, you need to have a PFS out by July next year.
Oh, wow.
So we think that's a huge advantage for any developer in Argentina, and we need to make best efforts to qualify for that. So we've got an inside line on making sure that we can de-risk the plus 150 development strategy and move from scoping to PFS, but then at the same time have that dual strategy of building out that sort of beyond 300 deeper underground resource potential, the sulfide potential. And we are absolutely confident that the scoping and PFS that we put out will just be a line in the sand. It'll be the base mark or the baseline, sorry, which will then grow on, and we think, through further exploration, we'll continue to not only grow the scale of the project, but the longevity of the project and the potential production profile of the project.
Well, I just want to congratulate you because, as I said, we haven't spoken for a while, but the amount of, I guess, forward thinking and also what you've done with this project in bringing those 5 deals together in opening up this whole district, if you like, is phenomenal. In 1 minute, I want you to give me 3 reasons that you think people should sit up and take notice of Unico Silver right now.
Simple. Resource growth. The bigger the number, the bigger the multiple. Fantastic. So we think we've got the best potential to grow our resources, just as any silver developer globally. Inside track to development. Obviously, as I've said, there's a huge amount of historical baseline technical work that's been done, which gives us a very quick and rapid pathway to advanced developer,
Yep.
which will increase the multiple paid per resource ounce. So we're growing the resource ounce and we're increasing the multiple paid, the market value of that resource ounce. And thirdly, momentum. We've got lots of momentum. We've hit the ground running, and really we can see a window opening not only within silver but within Argentina, and we're running for it. And that's it. I think that's that's the 3 main points.
Well, you did that extremely well. Thank you so much, Todd. What a journey you've had. I congratulate you on how you've taken this project. Enormous growth potential here, ladies and gentlemen, in a commodity that I love, which is silver. But he's also got some gold credits in there, so that's pretty interesting as well. So watch this space. Plenty of news to come, and Todd will also be at the Australian Gold Conference in Sydney in October. So if you want to pinch him and make sure he's real, ask him all the difficult questions, make sure you come along to that as well. But for now, Todd, thanks so much for joining me on Making Money Matter.
Excellent. Thanks for having me, Kerry.